Hey there, Black Sheep. Welcome back to the channel. This is the 6th episode of This Bites, the series where I analyze the weekly Watchtower and highlight how it implements the bite model. If you're unfamiliar with the bite model, it's the go-to method used to identify extreme control groups and cults, and the tactics they use to coerce, recruit, and maintain control of members. This episode of This Bite is a little different because I am on the road visiting family, but I am committed to putting these out every Friday, and so this is the best that I can do with what I have right now as a beginning YouTuber. In this episode, we're analyzing the study article 33 entitled Jehovah Watches Over His People in the August 2022 Watchtower Study Edition. Paragraphs 1 and 2 waste no time reminding you how at risk you are and that it's you and Jehovah against the world. Paragraph 1 says, Jesus knew that his followers would face unprecedented opposition from Satan. They would need Jehovah's help to resist the devil's wicked attacks. Satan's system puts an immense amount of pressure on true Christians today, says paragraph 2. Emotional control. Instill fear, such as fear of the outside world, enemies, losing one's salvation. Behavior control. Instill dependency and obedience. Thought control. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. Instill black and white thinking. Decide between good versus evil. Organize people into us versus them. Insiders versus outsiders. In paragraph 2, when they say true Christians today, they mean themselves, because thought control, labeling alternative belief systems as illegitimate, evil, or not useful. They are the only true Christians, they believe. And then after the paragraph scares you, it says that Jehovah is ever ready to help you to deal with these challenges. So Jehovah apparently is ready and eager to help in his own time for things that interest him. So sorry if you're that faithful young woman who battled cancer and the internet claims has since lost her battle. But great if you're this guy building a bridge on a multi-million-dollar plot of land.
Contractors have already been assisting to repair and strengthen an existing stone-faced bridge on the road into the site. When completed, the restoration of this structure will serve as a beautiful feature of the property. More important, Jehovah has greatly blessed the efforts to work through the planning process with the town of Ramapo.
I'm sorry if I sound insensitive. I'm very, very sorry and empathetic to the fight against cancer and the loss of life due to it. I just have trouble understanding why Jehovah would care more about this bridge being built than this young woman who had faithfully dedicated her life to him. Paragraph 3 says, we may occasionally feel alone. Some of us may feel sad or may struggle with negative emotions. This is their cutesy way of saying depression. You may feel sad or deal with negative emotions because the Watchtower is notoriously bad at handling mental health issues.
If you are lacking joy, work on being more joyful.
Jehovah's Witnesses are meant to feel skeptical if they do seek outside help or therapy, because the therapist, not being a witness, will potentially be used by Satan to manipulate the Jehovah's Witness and their feelings. Emotional control. Teach emotion-stopping techniques to block feelings of homesickness, anger, doubt.
Remember, Jehovah wants you to be nothing but joyful.
Jehovah never wants you to feel that way, so you should probably stop feeling that way, or do everything you can to deny those feelings, to stop those emotions. Side note, this was not the same cave as Lot and his daughters, because that story would have ended differently. Paragraphs 5 and 6 continue with Elijah. Paragraph 5 says, "No doubt Elijah felt relieved after pouring out his heart to Jehovah and hearing his response. Jehovah gave Elijah several important assignments." The question in paragraph 5 says, "How did Jehovah assure Elijah that he was not alone?" Well, as we just saw, Jehovah actually spoke to him and said, "Hey, you're not alone." So while Elijah was sitting alone in a cave, he heard a voice, and the voice told him he wasn't alone. Now, you won't get a response from Jehovah. Unfortunately, you can pray to Jehovah, say you feel alone, even go to a cave and do it. Location's not going to matter. Jehovah will not speak to you to reassure you, like he did Elijah and so many others in the Bible, speaking directly to them. For some reason, he's completely stopped doing that. And paragraph 6 says to tell him about your concerns and how they make you feel. Pour your heart out to Jehovah and accept the help of others, and you will feel less alone. This is an example of thought control, teaching thought-stopping techniques which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts, including denial, rationalization, justification, wishful thinking, meditating, and praying. It also mentions that in order to help Elijah cope, that Jehovah gave him various assignments. This is to encourage Jehovah's Witnesses to keep themselves busy with theocratic activities. In other words, spend more time serving the cult. And while even a therapist might say helping someone else could take your mind off of your problems and yourself, that's not usually the encouraged treatment. You're supposed to honor your feelings and sit with them and analyze them and find healthy coping mechanisms. But that's not what this is. The intent behind this is to keep Jehovah's Witnesses busy. Can't stop, won't stop, don't stop. If you stop for too long, you may start thinking and realize the real thief of your joy is this group's constant pressure, stress, demands, judgment, and isolation. Information control. Minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including keeping members so busy they don't have time to think and investigate. They encourage you to throw your burdens upon Jehovah. Just throw those feelings into the void. And then they give an example of why a young person or a kid might feel lonely, because kids are pressured to preach to their classmates. They're told that this is their own personal service territory, and that while missionaries and the pioneers and regular publishers may be going door to door, usually they can't reach the children. It's inappropriate for them to speak to children when they come and answer the door, if they're allowed to even come and answer the door. And so Jehovah's Witness children are told that they're meant to view their classmates as their own personal territory, and that they're meant to preach to them. And that when you miss opportunities of preaching, that you can become blood guilty if they lose their life at Armageddon. Thus, they, the child, Jehovah's Witness, may also lose their life at Armageddon. And constantly making yourself stand out from your peers by not celebrating the things that they celebrate, or constantly reading your literature from your religion, or trying to push it on them, can oftentimes make you an outcast or make other children maybe not want to talk to you. Jehovah's Witnesses are also constantly on guard because these other kids in their class may be unwittingly controlled by Satan and may be there to tempt them. They may be bad association. And this creates the perfect climate of isolation. So that's why a child may find themselves feeling lonely. They're lonely because of Jehovah. But they're still allowed to open up to him and let him know.
Carrie drew two mommies. She told me they're married to each other. My teacher says that all that matters is that people love each other and that they're happy.
Well, people have their own ideas about what is right and wrong. But what matters is how Jehovah feels.
But I want everyone to get to paradise.
So, what can you say to Carrie?
Well, I could tell her about the paradise. I could tell her about the animals and the resurrection.
That's awesome! Let's practice.
But a believing Jehovah's Witness would say that their feelings of loneliness being attributed to Jehovah and the pressures put on them by the governing body is blasphemous. And that if someone is struggling with negative feelings, they should rely on all of these tools here that are provided in this Watchtower. And this is emotional control. Make the person feel that problems are always their own fault, never the leader's or the group's fault. Paragraph 7 is really doubling down on the keep busy, distract yourself from your feelings and thoughts until you're too exhausted to remember them. The paragraph asks the question, how can keeping busy in this work help you when you feel alone? It then goes on to give us an example of Mauricio, and the footnote says some names have been changed. So just like Melissa from the last article, we're going to go with no one from nowhere. And no one from nowhere got baptized, and his closest friend also got baptized. Eventually, he saw that his closest friend was gradually pulling himself away from the truth, what they call their religion. And instead of confronting his friend or asking for the reasons why and possibly learning the truth about the truth, he began to get worried. He was like, oh, well, if my friend is able to fall into Satan's traps, maybe I could also fall into Satan's traps. And so in order to stop those thoughts and stop those emotions, what did he do? It says, I expanded my ministry. That helped me to keep my mind off myself and not dwell on my negative feelings. Behavior control. Major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals and or self-indoctrination, including the internet. Emotional control. Manipulate and narrow the range of feelings. Some emotions and or needs are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. So no one from nowhere's friend who may have woken up from his indoctrination and began to fade should not be asked why or what's making him leave. No, he's unspiritual, weak, corrupt, and there's no reason to worry about leaving because you know that no happiness is achievable. So just throw yourself into preaching because you don't want to end up like that guy. This is an example of emotional control. Phobia indoctrination. Inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. No happiness or fulfillment possible outside of the group. Shunning of those who leave. Never a legitimate reason to leave. Those who leave are weak, undisciplined, unspiritual, worldly, brainwashed by family or counselor, or seduced by money, sex, or rock and roll. Most people think that Jehovah's Witnesses are just a non-threatening, maybe very strict religious sect of Christianity, but it is in fact a doomsday cult. And this here is an example of emotional control. Instill fear, such as fear of the outside world, enemies, losing one's salvation. Jehovah's Witnesses are constantly being reminded that the end of days, that Armageddon could be any day now, to stay on their toes about it. They are encouraged at the end of paragraph 8, though, to remember that Jehovah is watching over them, and with his help they can face any trial with confidence. His help is up for interpretation, because you'll never really 100% know when you're receiving it, because his proof of backing varies. Sometimes he'll part a Red Sea and create a pillar of fire, and sometimes, as we'll see in the case of his dedicated servant Job, Jehovah may just sit back and let Satan kill your wife and all your children and livestock and kill your will to live before he even shows his support by sending some young guy to tell you, thoughts and prayers, get well soon. According to paragraph 10, Jehovah loved Job, and he gave him what he needed to endure his trials. I'm sure he would have said he needed his kids or relief from his painful boils, but no. He got Elihu, who so lovingly reminded Job that he is not more righteous than Jehovah to even question the trials that he was facing, and that Jehovah rewards his worshipers for their endurance. So, that's great comfort there. Paragraph 11 reminds you that, unlike Elijah and Job, Jehovah doesn't want to talk to you. He does speak to you through his word, the Bible. It then says, God's word also reminds us that our trials are temporary and brief when compared to everlasting reward he offers us. Jehovah gives us the sure hope that he will eliminate the root cause of all our trials, Satan, the devil, and those who imitate his wicked ways. Thought control, teaching thought-stopping techniques which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts, including denial, rationalization, justification, wishful thinking, meditating, praying. Have you ever watched someone you love die? Because Jehovah, who wrote the Bible, and the governing body, who are now claiming to interpret it for you, want you to know that in the grand scheme of things, in Jehovah's big picture, that's nothing. It's temporary and brief. And like Job, you should stop feeling sorry for yourself. Two words that stuck out to me in this paragraph were everlasting and eliminate. You're either part of the group suffering and grabbing tiny glimpses of hope as you slave for this organization, waiting day in and day out for a global genocide to take your pain away and bring about everlasting life, or you're the group that will be eliminated in said genocide. Thought control. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. Instill black and white thinking. Decide between good versus evil. Organize people into us versus them. Insiders versus outsiders. Paragraph 12 says to set aside time to study the Bible regularly and to think deeply about what we read. And this, again, is behavior control. Major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals and or self-indoctrination, including the internet. Paragraph 13 says, with Jehovah's backing, the faithful and discreet slave, the governing body, produces an abundance of articles, videos, and music that can help us to build strong faith and stay alert spiritually. We need to take full advantage of such timely provisions. Information control. Extensive use of cult-generated information and propaganda, including newsletters, magazines, journals, audio tapes, videotapes, YouTube, movies, and other media. A sister from the United States, very vague, is quoted in the article as saying that Jehovah has always cared for her and that the spiritual food he has provided through the faithful and discreet slave has helped her to endure. There's only one way to get close to Jehovah and to endure, and that's by indoctrinating yourself and constantly occupying your mind, your time, and your energies with the timely spiritual food provided by the governing body. And like I said, they're notoriously bad for handling mental health because still they've not said anything about going to a therapist or finding help or medication or anything like that. It's simply pray, go out in the ministry, talk to other brothers and sisters who are spiritually active and can influence you to spend more time doing religious things. This is information control. Minimize or discourage access to non-cult sources of information, including internet, TV, radio, books, articles, newspapers, magazines, media, critical information, former members. Keep members busy so they don't have time to think and investigate. They don't want you to go to a therapist. A therapist might be like, oh, well, maybe if you take a break from this activity, or if you read this article, or attend this group therapy session, or even here's a TED Talk about emotions and validating them. Literally anything. Any other kind of potentially helpful sources that are out there by professionals, mental health professionals. No. Instead, just pray. Just go out in service. Just surround yourself with other believing Jehovah's Witnesses. And eventually, when the Armageddon comes, you might feel better. Paragraph 14 reads, Jehovah has trained his people to love and to comfort one another during distressing times. This should not require training. Isn't this meant to be natural affection? A story about a brother and sister helping someone going through a difficult time, which is all well and nice, but not unique to Jehovah's Witnesses. There are other religions and charities that go out and assist people. In fact, some may argue do more good to the overall community in tangible ways. I mean, the suicide hotline isn't run by Jehovah's Witnesses. Paragraph 15 says that Jehovah is always watching over us. He is by our side, ready to hear our pleas for help and eager to, the paragraph says, support us, but I would say to sit back, watch, and see what happens. Is he feeling like giving you a bucket of sand or letting you die slowly of an illness? Who knows? It then says that he has given us the gift of prayer, the Bible, an abundance of spiritual food, and a loving brotherhood to help us in times of need. When I was a believing Jehovah's Witness, I once had a dream that our house was broken into. And I heard the robbers come into the house, and that one of them went back out to the car and got a big box, and they started loading in our things and our TV, and that I was scared, and I was looking over the top balcony, and I just started throwing Bibles at them, and that one of the robbers looked up at me like, are you serious right now? And I don't know if this was foreshadow or some sort of subconscious relation of my true feelings about how useful the Bible and its teachings were. But I would say in that instance, although the Bible was provided to me, it was not helpful in my time of need. And the last paragraph, paragraph 16, finishes off by saying, if we continue to do our best to obey Jehovah and do what is right in his eyes, he will watch over us forever. Of course, it's a finale of emotional control. Promote feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as you are not living up to your potential. Your thoughts, feelings, actions are irrelevant or selfish. Emotional control. Instill fear, such as fear of thinking independently, the outside world, enemies, losing one's salvation, leaving or being shunned by the group. Emotional control. Phobia indoctrination. Inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. No happiness or fulfillment possible outside of the group. Terrible consequences if you leave. Shunning of those who leave. Never a legitimate reason to leave. According to the paragraph, according to the governing body, leaders of the Jehovah's Witness organization say that if you do not obey and if you leave the organization, then you will not be doing your part to remain under God's care. And it's going to be you against the world instead of you and Jehovah against the world. Leave. Fortunately for you and I, none of this is true. And we can live in peace and find healthy ways to deal with negative emotions and to heal properly and find happiness despite world conditions. And that brings us to the end of the article. So let's tally it up. We have 3 for behavior control, 3 for information control, 4 for thought control, and 8 for emotional control. So that gives this article a score of 3,348. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and if you enjoyed our time, please give this video a like, subscribe, and ring the bell so that you can join me every Friday when we take a bite out of the weekly Watchtower. Continue to think freely, Black Sheep.